Years ago, my uncle owned a funeral home, and I got a summer job, working part-time in the crematorium. It wasn't a lot of fun, but it certainly paid well. And being a poor student, I definitely needed the money. Dealing with dead bodies was very creepy at first, but after a few days, you kind of get used to it. Kind of. So one morning, I was sweeping the floor of the crematorium when a black hearse pulled up in the parking lot outside. A man in a black suit stepped out, and my uncle went over to talk to him. After a while, he called me over and told me to help him carry the coffin into the crematorium. I thought it was strange because usually they brought the coffins into the funeral home next door first, but I didn't ask questions. We set the coffin down on the ground, and my uncle went over to prepare the oven for cremation. For a few minutes, I was left alone with the man in the black suit. There was an awkward silence. I didn't know what to say. I assumed that it was the relative who had just died who was lying in the coffin, but he didn't seem at all upset. When the oven was ready, my uncle and I picked up the coffin and brought it over to the metal bench. We took off the top of the casket. I saw the corpse inside was a man who looked to be about 30 years old. Usually, the dead bodies were very pale, but this one looked pink in the face. My uncle stoked the fire, then pressed a button to start the conveyor belt. The coffin was moved slowly into the oven, and it was all the way inside. My uncle closed the door, and I just stood around, waiting. It usually took an hour before everything was burnt and reduced to ashes. After that, I would have to collect the ashes and put them in an urn, so they could be given to the family. My uncle and the man in the black suit went into the funeral home next door. I assumed they were filling out the usual paperwork, so I was left alone in the crematorium to continue sweeping up. After about 10 minutes, I heard a strange noise coming from the oven. It was like a faint knocking sound. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then it grew into a loud banging. I tried to tell myself that it was just the metal warping from the heat. It was the unmistakable sound of someone frantically banging on something, desperately trying to get out. A chill went down my spine and the brush fell from my hands. I was sure the man inside was still alive. Terrified, I ran into the funeral home and, shaking uncontrollably, I told my uncle what I had heard. Leading them back into the crematorium, I told them to listen. "I don't hear anything," said my uncle. "Me neither," said the man in the black suit. I looked at them, shocked and stunned. I even began to doubt my own sanity. My uncle and the man in the black suit shrugged their shoulders and went back to the funeral home. I just stood in the middle of the crematorium listening intently, collected the ashes from the tray underneath and poured them into an urn. The man took it and, with a broad smile on his face, he got back into his car and drove away. I have nightmares about that hideous banging sound I heard coming from inside the oven.